not entirely sure where to start with this month's reading, to be honest. Hey everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is my February wrap up. February was a weird month. No other way to describe it really. I had grand plans to finish all of these series that I'd started, and I did finish some. There are, I think, 4 series in here that I have managed to finish. So, you know, not a complete failure in that respect. But I did not do what I planned to do. A couple of things happened. Some work stuff, some life stuff. Also just getting an arc of a really anticipated read and wanting to read that instead of what I had on my TBR. There were a few different things that came up that meant my reading did not quite go to plan. That being said, it was not a bad reading month by any means, and I'm going to start off by giving you some stats to kind of show that. So I read a grand total of 9 books during the month of February. Now I read 11 in January, so it's 2 less, but also it was the shortest month of the year, so you know, pretty good. 10 is usually my average, so 9 is still fantastic. I read a total of 4,709 pages, which is an average of 168 per day, which is well over the 100 average that I like per day, and is also higher than the average that I had in January, which was 155. So like I said, definitely a decent reading month, even if it didn't quite go the way that I expected it to. In terms of the format of books I read, I actually read 2 ebooks in February. I very rarely read ebooks. The reason for this is that one of the books was part of a series and the only way I could read it was an ebook, and then the other one is an arc of a book that I will be getting physically this month. But again, the only way I could read it was the e-arc, and it was my most anticipated read of the year. So I had to read it immediately. I was not waiting for a physical copy. So yes, 2 completely ebooks, 4 that were a mixture of book and audio or ebook and audio, something like that, but basically a mixture, and then 3 that were completely physical. And then for the age range, this is where it gets interesting, but also kind of shows you, I think, what series I still had left over from many years ago, because I read 7 YA books and 2 adult, and recently it's been 50-50, leaning more towards adult if anything. It's not been this skewed in YA in the entire time of me having this channel, I think, which has been a year nearly now. So yeah, definitely because I was trying to finish series, and most of the series that I had was YA. That being said, the really anticipated read that I'll get to shortly was also YA, although I will discuss the age range of that one when I get to it, because it's a very hard to categorise book. But yeah, mostly YA, which, I mean, I think that might contribute to me feeling a little bit meh about my reading this month, because although I had some really like high rated books, I am just really enjoying adult books at the minute. So maybe it's because I wasn't reading as many of those. I just don't feel like I came out feeling quite as good about my reading. I'm not entirely sure. I just feel a bit strange about how my reading month went. I wouldn't categorise it as being a great month, even though the stats are saying it was fine. It's a bit strange. I don't know why I'm overthinking it so much, to be honest. I just am. But yeah, in terms of star ratings, the star ratings are actually pretty high. I had 1 3-star read, 2 4-star reads, and then 6 5-star reads. So like I said, star ratings pretty damn good. It means that I had an average of 4.56, which again is higher than January, because my average in January was 4.27. So definitely good. I think with that, again, you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute, but I read a lot of books by some favourite authors, so that probably contributed to the high ratings. Right, I think that is enough stats and numbers and all those rambly things. What I'm going to do now is just talk you through the books that I did manage to read and give you some thoughts on them. To be honest, although it was the shortest month of the year, some of these ones from the beginning of the month feel so long ago that I don't know how coherent my thoughts are going to be, but we will try. Okay, so the 2 adult books that I read were actually the first 2 books that I read in the month, and the first one being Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. So this is the final book in the Daevabad trilogy. I have given the first 2 books in the Daevabad trilogy 4 stars, and I was really just desperate for a 5-star read in this series, and this did not disappoint. This one got a 5-star. I really enjoyed this book, so I can't give you too much of a synopsis. This is going to be a running theme throughout this video because a lot of them are continuations of series, but the basic premise of this trilogy is it follows a character called Nori, who is living in Cairo, and she's making her way as a bit of a con artist, tricking people into believing that she has this magic healing ability. And then she finds out that actually it might not be as much of a trick as she thought it was, and that she may actually have some type of power. And she meets a djinn, and she gets taken to his sort of home world and finds a little bit more about how she's connected to all of that. And then it becomes this big kind of political fantasy series as well, with these warring groups. And I really enjoyed all of the series. Like I said, the first two got 4 stars. They were very, very high 4 stars. My only issue with them is that the first one took a little bit of time to get into. The second one felt a bit like a filler book. This one solved all of that. It dove straight into the story and it didn't let up throughout, and I just didn't want to put it down. I really, really enjoyed it. I really like all of the characters. There is a bit of a love triangle in this series, but it works really, really well. Like, I like all of the characters involved, and I really loved the series. I'm looking forward to rereading it at some point in the future, because I think I will actually prefer the first two on reread because I now know the entire story. I believe there is also a short story collection coming out within this world at some point, maybe this year. So I'm excited to see that. I'm also excited to see what this author writes next. But yeah, started the month strong with a 5-star read. Very, very happy about it. We then read my next adult book, the book that broke me a little bit this month, and that is Errand by Robin Hobb. This one is also a 5-star read. We expect nothing less from Robin Hobb. I think I've only given one of her books less than 5 stars, and that was a very, very high 4-star rating, and again on reread maybe a 5 anyway. But this one had us back with Fitz. I love Fitz. I know a lot of people prefer the live ship traders and the sort of multi-POV ones. I just really love Fitz as a character, so I like his stories, and this is the first one in the second Fitz trilogy, and it's set about 15 years after the first one, so it's a little bit older, and it's just, I can't tell you too much else about it. Fitz is a bastard son of the crown prince, and one day he is dropped on his father's doorstep, and his father quickly abdicates the throne, and Fitz is left to be raised by the stable master. And then one day the king realises that he could be a little bit helpful, because he can get close to the nobles, but he's also far enough away that he can do more nefarious things, and he gets trained as an assassin. That is the basic premise of the first trilogy. This, like I said, is set 15 years later. I can't tell you much about what happens in this at all, because it will completely spoil everything in the original trilogy, but it is Fitz 15 years later. It's also following a character called the Fool, who is probably my favourite character in this entire series, and I love Fitz and the Fool together, and yeah, I just loved it. I loved all the little sort of references to the last trilogy as well, the live ship traders. It all just came together so well, and I'm so excited to see where this series is going now. But also, this book, as I mentioned, did break me a little bit. So there's something that happens further on into this book that, to be honest, is foreshadowed from the very, very beginning. There's a lot of talk of this particular event potentially happening at some point, and you just don't quite know how it's going to happen. And then the way that it happens as well is it kind of, you think it's going to happen at a few different moments, and then it doesn't actually happen. So you kind of think you're prepared for it, and then when it does actually happen, it's handled so beautifully that it just broke me a little bit. I don't really cry at books, but this one was very, very close. Like, yeah, it was beautiful, but also horrible. And yeah, I have nothing else to say. I've started reading the sequel to this already, and I'm loving that as well. And yeah, I'm just very, very happy to be back with Fitz and the Fool and all of those sorts of people. So the next book that I read is actually a reread that was quite interesting, actually, because when I first read this book, I gave it 2 stars. When I read it this time, I gave it 5 stars. I have no idea. I really don't. But that is Illuminati by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So I read this 5 years ago, I think it was, and I just remember being a little bit bored by it, to be honest. And it is all told in mixed media. So it's a sci-fi story about this fleet of spaceships that are on the run after their colony has been sort of attacked, and they're on the run with the help of this AI that is working in the ships. But then things go wrong on the ship. Something goes wrong with the AI. There's also this disease that's spreading, and it just kind of goes from there. I said when I was reading this, it reminds me of the TV show Battlestar Galactica, and Battlestar Galactica is one of my favourite series, actually, so that is a good thing. But when I read it the first time, I don't know why. I don't know if it was a mixed media aspect, because like I said, it is all like chat logs, and there are diagrams, there are pages where you have to kind of turn it as you're reading it. And I don't know if I just thought it was like style over substance or what. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, so that could be part of it as well. I don't know if I was just in the wrong place for it at the time that I read it, but I decided to reread it after sort of really liking a lot of J. Kristoff's other books in the last year. And yeah, I just really, really loved this. I couldn't put it down. It was very, very enjoyable. I was just in the mood for it, I suppose, this time. So this was a 5-star. I did then also carry on and read Gemini and Obsidio, and I gave all of these 5 stars, to be honest. I also then read Memento, but we'll get to that one in a minute because I'm going to talk about that one a little bit differently. But yeah, I ended up giving all of these 5 stars. So Illuminati, I just really enjoyed. It was a nice setup to the story. Gemini, I've heard people... Gemini is actually a bit strange because I've heard like a few people DNF this one because I think it felt like it was just sort of a rehash of the first one, but this could potentially actually be my favourite. Like, I don't know, I just really like the characters in this. It's 2 new characters, they're called Hannah and Nick, and I really liked their storyline in this one. So the thing is that the first one is about a disease. It's kind of a pandemic, to be honest, which is a little bit uncomfortable to read. But then the second one is more about this group of bad guys sort of infiltrating the ship and then fighting against it. And then there's a story with a black hole involved as well, and just those sort of like that sort of sci-fi plot really intrigued me. So I think it was actually the plot line of this one was more interesting to me. And then we have the third one, Obsidio, which I also gave 5 stars, although this might be my lowest rated of the series. I enjoyed the actual storyline of it and how it all wrapped up. There's some really interesting plot lines in here. My only issue is that we had 2 new characters whose technically this was their story, and their names were Asher and Reese. But the problem is that because you were also going back to Katie and Ezra from the first one and Hannah and Nick from the second one, you didn't get a lot of time with Asher and Reese, which meant that I was kind of supposed to buy their story without really getting to know them too much. So that's my only issue. Like, I still enjoyed it, but it was just, I didn't have as much time to connect to the actual main characters I was supposed to be connecting to. But that being said, I was kind of okay with that because it meant I got to spend more time with the characters from these ones. So yeah, a 5-star series. I really, really loved it, and I'm really glad that I finally carried on with this series. I did mention that I read Memento, which is the novella that I believe was originally published as a pre-order campaign for Obsidio. It's only about 80 pages long. I flew through this. As you can imagine, these books were really quick reads anyway, so an 80-page novella was nothing. That is a prequel about when Aiden, the AI, was first sort of put into place. I did enjoy that one, but again, just because it was sort of like this extra story that was very short and was a new bunch of characters apart from Aiden, the human characters in it I just felt absolutely no connection to. So I enjoyed the bits with Aiden, but the rest of it was just a bit So I gave it 4 stars. It was enjoyable enough, but not as good as these ones. I then carried on my Amy Kaufman J. Kristoff kick, and I finished the Aurora cycle with Auroras End. I really enjoyed this one. I gave this one 4 stars, so obviously I did prefer the Illuminati files, which is strange because I normally would expect that I would actually like a prose novel rather than a mixed media novel, and there were bits of this I absolutely adored. The tagline for this is "It's About Time," and that is a big sort of hint for the type of storyline that this is. It is basically, I forgot to give you a synopsis, basically this tells the story of Tyler Jones, who is a star pupil at this Space Cadet Academy, and then the night before he's supposed to graduate, to sort of calm his nerves a little bit, he takes one of the ships out for a spin and ends up coming across this wreckage of a spaceship, and there is one survivor, and her name is Aurora, and in rescuing her he ends up missing his graduation and missing his pick of the draft of the other graduates, and he ends up with the dregs in his team that he is captain of, and then things kind of go from there with finding out a little bit more about Aurora and where she comes from and all of that sort of business. And when I said that Illuminati reminds me of Battlestar Galactica, I would say this one reminds me of Firefly. It's sort of this ragtag bunch of people who just get thrown together and go on an adventure, and I really do like this series. I really like the storyline of it and where it goes from there. And like I said, the tagline for this one, "It's About Time," gives you an idea of the type of storyline and the type of sci-fi trope that they use in this one. And it's one of my favourite things to be done in sci-fi film and TV. So I loved it in book format as well. But my only issue is that this is based around this team of people that have this sort of unlikely connection, this sort of found family vibes. But that team of people weren't together for the majority of this book. They were in kind of three groups, and the group that had sort of most of them in together was my favourite part, because you got to see them all interacting with each other and it was just really fun. And then the other two bits were, one of them was interesting, one of them was a bit like, okay, we're just going to get back to everything else now. And they only actually came together, I think, for the last chapter, and I just wish I'd have been able to see more of that gang interacting throughout, because that's what I'm here for in these books. So really enjoyable, but just not perfect, unfortunately. But yeah, still a 4-star series. All three of these books got 4 stars. I still really loved it, and I'm really glad that I finished it, because basically I was supposed to read this in November when it first came out, but for some reason the audiobook in the UK got delayed, and these audiobooks for these ones are amazing. It's a full cast, and I was just waiting for the audiobook to come out because I read and listened to the audiobook at the same time, and it finally came out in February. So glad that I've been able to read it now. And the next book we have to talk about, I don't actually have the physical copy to hold up because it hasn't come out in the UK yet. It was supposed to be out yesterday as I'm filming this, and it's been pushed back, so I should be getting it next week, fingers crossed. But I got an ARC anyway, and it is my most anticipated book of the year, and that is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I was so happy when I got approved for the ARC of this. I said straight away, I'm filling my TBR and reading this, because that was right in the middle of all of the stress that happened this month, and I just needed it. I just needed it. So this tells the story of Olivia Pryor. So she's 16 years old. She's grown up as an orphan in this school for girls. She's not had a particularly great time of it. And then one day she gets a letter inviting her to come to Gallant, which is this old family home. She finds out that she has some family out there. But when she gets there, things aren't quite what they seem. There is a wall in the back garden that she's told to stay away from. And that's all I'm going to say. Spookiness ensues from there. It's a very atmospheric book. It's quite slow, quite a calm book. I don't want to explain it too much, because I think it's one of those that you should just read and enjoy, and I hope you will enjoy it, because I gave it 5 stars. I mean, I love V.E. Schwab's writing anyway. We know this. She's my favourite author. I get to meet her at the end of the month, and I'm so excited for it. But anyway, I was so excited to read this book, and it did not disappoint. The writing is quite lyrical and quite beautiful, but without being like over the top. If you liked the writing in Addie LaRue, you'll probably like this. If you dislike the writing in Addie LaRue, I'm not sure if it's for you, but I would say it's maybe not quite as flowery as that is. I just found it, like I said, really atmospheric, and I didn't want to put it down because I just wanted to see what happened. That being said, I did sort of stop reading it for about 3 days in the middle, but I think that was more me being slumpy than anything else, because when I started reading it again, I read it very, very quickly, and I really, really adored this book. And I'm not going to say much else, because I just really liked it. The other thing I will say actually is, don't go into this one thinking it's going to be this sort of action-packed, lots of twists and turns. Like I said, it's quite calm, it's quite quiet. Just be along for the ride. That's all you need to do. I have one more book to talk about, and unfortunately that is my lowest rated book of the month, and it is The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks by Mackenzie Lee. So a couple of things here. This is the last book in the Montague Siblings series. I started reading this one when it first came out. The first one is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, and then we have the ladies, I've got it at the side of me. Then we have The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy. To be honest, I wasn't sure if I was going to buy this book. I didn't know if it was particularly necessary, and also things were happening with the author, and I was just like, do I want to support her? But I ended up getting it on an offer, and it was really cheap, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to finish it because I am a completionist. So I finished the series, and yeah, it was a bit unnecessary, to be honest. So basically this series follows 3 siblings, and it is set during the 1700s, I believe. Yeah, 17 something. So it's set during the 1700s, and the first one is about a character called Monte who goes on his grand tour, which is basically when sort of teenage boys come of age and they go on this last trip to kind of be wild and be free before they settle down and get married. And he goes on that and gets involved with some pirates along the way, and it's also about him being bisexual and about that not sort of being accepted at the time, and him being a little bit obsessed with his best friend. And it's just this really fun queer pirate adventure story. And then the second one is about Felicity, who's on the ace spectrum, and it's about her wanting to be a doctor in a time when women weren't allowed to study medicine. And again, just this, they're both sort of stories of those characters breaking the mold in that era. And this one still has elements of that. It's about Adrian, who is struggling a lot with anxiety in this. So Adrian is the younger brother of the character in the first 2 books. He was a baby in the first one, so it is set quite a while after, because he's like 19 in this one, I think. And And yeah, I just don't know if it was necessary, to be honest, because it did have those sort of elements of breaking away from the family, because the father is not a particularly nice person, and it did have elements of that, but it also didn't really address it. So at the end, I didn't really know where he stood, to be honest. And I just don't know if it was needed. Like, it was fine, but there was also this like little bit of a ghostly element to it, which I found a bit strange, because these, as far as I knew, were just historical fiction. There was nothing fantastical about them. But then it started talking about like the Flying Dutchman, which is supposed to be a ghost ship, and it was all very strange, and it was fine. I'm probably going to forget that it existed, hence why it was a 3-star. There we go. So that was a little bit of a downer to end the month. Luckily, I've started March by reading the book that I'm most excited about, my TBR, and I'm liking it so far. So, you know, I've gone from disappointment to hopefully a successful reading month in March. But yeah, let me grab my stack of books that I've read and show you what February looked like. So this was my February reading, plus Gallant, plus Memento. So, you know, like I said, not a bad stack, just not quite what I wanted it to do. But I did at least manage to finish 1, 2, 3, 4 series. So better than nothing. I'm happy about it in the end. I am. No, I've still got all those series that I need to finish, and I'm going to have to do this again in another month later on in the year. Right, that is everything. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know how your February reading month went, and I will see you next time with a new video. Bye.